This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
Oh, greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to another Bantha Tracks bonus episode of Mandovision. I am your host, Nargai Tom. Thank you for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. So glad that you're with us. Reach out to us on the socials. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. Alright, Bucketheads, you notice we're back. And I wasn't so sure we would be. It is once again Mandovision After Dark. We are, like Judas Priest, living after midnight and rocking to the dawn. I'm going to go behind the curtains a little bit here with you guys because it has been an interesting evening, and I thought I should share with you guys because I don't even know how to articulate the night that I've had. Again, it's nothing wild, nothing crazy, but it was the unexpected. And I think I can tie that in to the Acolyte from last night. But we'll see if I can pull that off or not. You be the judge. So, tonight, well, I guess technically, as I record the show at 1:21 a.m., it is Thursday morning. But Wednesday night, I'm finishing up my shift at work. I come home. I pull into... let me give you a little background. The complex in which I live has 2 garage entrances. I'm coming home at 11:22 p.m. through one of these entrances. Now, it's a straight shot through the community garage to see the other entrance/exit. As I park my car, or even before I park my car, I notice through the other exit that there is a car just sitting there, which is odd. It's 11:22 at night. So I park my car, I grab my stuff out of my vehicle, and as I'm sort of crossing the lot towards the elevators, this car is just sitting there. And then all of a sudden its engines turn on and the headlights come on, but it still just sits there. And I stare. I give it like a long, dramatic pause as I glance at this car, and I can't see anyone inside of it. The car's unrecognizable to me. It doesn't look like anybody who lives in my complex. We live in a fairly small complex, so most of the cars, you become familiar with the vehicles of your neighbors. So my red flags are going off, let's put it that way. But I decide I am not one for direct confrontation. So I take my groceries, I go up the elevator, I go to my home, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to put my groceries down on my front porch, and I'm up on the 3rd floor. So I'm going to go take a peek. I can walk along the outside of this top floor that we're on, and I can go to the other side where the other entrance to the garage is at. And from there, I can look down and be able to see if perhaps it is one of my neighbors. Perhaps it's a neighbor on a date having a discussion with somebody, whatever the case may be. And then that'll end things, right? I'll recognize somebody, and that'll be the end of that. So I go over to the far end of the complex. I look down. I do not see a neighbor that I recognize. I see a stranger in a vehicle that I do not recognize. And I'm watching the stranger do strange things in this vehicle. And again, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, at this point, Tom is going to go, he's going to go put on the Beskar. He's going to strap on his bucket. Let's go. Well, my friends, the Beskar is in the shop. And again, I'm just not that confrontational. It's not my style. It's not how I like to roll. So I made a friendly call to the police, and reported a very suspicious vehicle with suspicious activity inside of it. Fast forward, the police do come in a fairly expedient manner. And next thing I know, this guy's being taken away in restraints. There's a tow truck called out to remove his vehicle from my lot. And I'm just sort of flabbergasted by the whole situation. Now, again, I might be a touch more sensitive than others to this kind of situation because our garage has been broken into. We have had property stolen. We have had neighbors get their cars broken into. So I tend to be a little bit on high alert when I see strange things occurring in and around the parking garage. But I've never had to call, outside of work, I've never had to call 911 for anything in my life. So it was a night of new things. Like I said, the police took this person away, I suspect for valid reasons. They did not call me back to inform me of anything. So I don't know for sure, but it's been quite the night. But and suffice to say, we're recording this little mini bonus show much later than we normally have in the past, and mostly because like I'm a little wired from the situation, so I can't quite go to sleep just yet. But the plan was to come back on here, talk to you guys a little bit more about the last episode of the Acolyte, and just because I kind of had some other thoughts, like last night after we recorded, and then into this morning when I thought about it, I was thinking about things a little bit more, and so I wanted to share with you guys because that's what we do. That's what the podcast is for, and I still sort of stand by what I was saying in yesterday's podcast. I'm not going to be backtracking on any one particular element. I did find this episode to still be a tad disjointed, which has been my sort of pet peeve. No, pet peeve, that's not the right word. No, that's just sort of been like my take on the series overall so far. It's like it's a little disjointed. But what I wanted to talk about in retrospect, kind of looking back on the episode, it's titled Choice. And I think that's an interesting title for the episode because so much of it is based on each of these characters making very, very unique choices that, in the case of the Jedi in particular, ultimately lead to disaster. And again, maybe they all had the noblest of intentions, but ultimately they choose disaster. Now, I think the title specifically refers to Osha and Mother Anastasia, and the fact that Mother Anastasia decides to not be the leader of the coven. She chooses to be the mother, chooses a choice. She chooses to be mother to Osha instead of leader of this coven, and gives the choice of what Osha shall do to her, turns it over. Like, let the child will make her own choice. The child will decide. And as we know from going back to episode 3, Mother Anastasia and Mother Coral clearly had plans for Osha and May. What those plans are, we still don't know. How exactly their existence came to be, we still don't really know that either. We get a little bit more information. We talked about the symbiotes last night, the identical symbiotes that maybe explain why Sol was unable to distinguish between May and Osha. But the idea of choice versus destiny, right? Because that's what episode 3 is called, is destiny. Then you have choice. And this is one of those philosophical arguments that I think Star Wars can have a lot of fun with when it wants to. The idea of are we free to make our own decisions, or is everything predestined? It's something that many fantasy shows and sci-fi shows have talked about over and over and over again. And I like that discussion. I think it's a fun philosophical debate. But what we see in this episode is the choices that each of these characters is making may ultimately be destiny for the Jedi, as Mother Anastasia sort of predicts to Master Sol that by doing what they've done, there will be sort of lasting consequences against the Jedi. Now, what will those be? What form will that take? I mean, I think ultimately we know that Order 66 is in store for the Jedi, but perhaps these are those first steps. Perhaps what Soul sets in motion here is the first of the dominoes to fall that put the Jedi Order in the position to have Order 66 wipe them out. Again, and we've talked about that a little bit more in earlier episodes of the show. Like, all of this is the plan of the Sith from the beginning. Like, this is, again, even if the Coven is not directly involved with the Sith, this has been their plan since the time of Darth Bane, was to put things in motion that would give the Jedi, that would put the Jedi in a bad position. And I think we see it in this episode that Sol and Torben and Kalnaka and Indara are making choices that are going to have disastrous repercussions, not just for themselves, but for the Jedi. In the short term, what I think we're going to see is, and again, Indara provides information. She tries to rein in Sol. Sol's on a bit of a crusade here. I think he believes that he is saving Osha from this coven, that he's doing the right thing, that he's doing the thing that a Jedi should do. But these choices now have consequences, and Sol directly kills Mother Anastasia in front of May, hence why she's so mad at Sol and the other Jedi. Again, the choice, the title of this episode being Choice, I think is insightful because of the sort of dominoes that begin to fall from every choice that every single character makes. And particularly, again, I suspect the choice that we're referring to in the title is Osha's choice. But the Jedi are making choices too, and they are not good ones. And again, maybe the intentions are noble, but and probably most, I don't know if I want to use that word, but ultimately that leads them to make the worst choice of all, which is to cover up what happens on Brendok. And everything sort of spirals from there. Again, Torben's going to take the Barash vow. Kalnaka's going to isolate himself on Kofar. And again, we didn't talk about it last night, but the fact that that a Wookiee like unsheathed his claws, that's a big no-no in Wookiee culture. So I suspect that's why Kalnaka would ultimately choose to isolate himself in the jungles of Kofar, because he unsheathed his claws, and that is bad. I believe a Wookiee with unsheathed claws is known as a Mad Claw, because it's not done in appropriate Wookiee culture, and when Wookiees do that, they are exiled. So Kalnaka seems to have exiled himself for his actions in the fight against Torben. So again, each of these choices, and ultimately the choice to cover up what happens on Brendok, is what sets all of this in motion. Now, I want to know how it's going to tie together with the Sith. Again, I still believe in the idea that maybe we're going to get to Darth Plagueis through this, or perhaps Plagueis is the one running around pulling these strings. I'd like to think that's the case. But again, if you go back, and again, I know it's still considered Legends, but Darth Bane is canon. And if you read that Darth Bane trilogy, you would know that Darth Bane is the reason why the Sith are so invested in politics, and they're doing all their work behind the scenes and moving money around and gaining influence over certain sectors, all so that they can get to the point where they can destabilize the Jedi. And so they're moving the Jedi Order around as they move these political pawns that they have around as well. So does this situation on Brendok now put the Jedi in a spot where they might be, as Vernestra has been fearing, more under the control of the Senate? Again, we've talked about the oversight that senators want to have over the Jedi. That's sort of been hinted at in this series. And for Vernestra's sort of attempts to keep that from happening. But ultimately, I suspect Brendok will become known. Maybe the Jedi become more under the thumb of the Senate. It's hard to say for sure, because my view of the Jedi in the prequels is that they're not necessarily under the thumb of the Senate. Now, yes, they're more tied to the politics of the time. They do seem to do the Chancellor's bidding more. But if you've read the High Republic novels, that relationship seems very similar to what is going on in the High Republic novels. So I don't know if Vernestra's trying to get the Jedi away from the politics, but it doesn't seem to be happening. Um, and I suspect we'll find out more about that in our season finale. Season finale. I think the season finale. I mean, I know there has been talk that there's plans for more than one season of the Acolyte, but again, if you get a chance to rewatch this episode, um, putting it back to back with episode 3, I think will give you guys a little bit more insight into what they're trying to do, what they're trying to show, because of the dueling perspectives of basically the same events. And again, think about Soul's sort of limited perspective. It wasn't until I watched it again that I sort of came to the conclusion that what he's seen at the witch's home is different than what I initially thought he would see. He sees Force users using the Force in ways that are non-Jedi like. He sees the girls being trained for combat, being pushed around via the Force. He's seen negative things. My take on it initially was that he was seeing them going through like Force training like you would see with the younglings. But I think Soul has a very different read on the situation than I initially suspected. And that's what sets him on this path to be a child stealer, essentially. And again, certain points of view. That's why watching episode 7 and episode 3, probably watch 3 first and then 7, you'll get a little bit more of a fuller picture of certain points of view, as we are fond of saying in Star Wars. So again, just kind of like some food for thought. Again, I do have my concerns with this episode. We end up coming out of this with a lot of questions. We get some answers. We know what happened now on Brendok. The choices that the Jedi make ultimately puts them on this path, but ultimately the choice they make to cover it up might be the biggest disastrous thing they could have done. And and ironically enough, Soul killing Mother Anastasia, the one person who was actually kind of on his side and was going to let Osha go with the Jedi. So a lot of dominoes begin to fall with those choices and those actions made by Soul, Torben, Indira, by everybody. So the Jedi definitely in the wrong, but they should have come clean when they had the chance. Why Indira decided that this was the easier option to sort of protect Osha by letting May take the fall, but May, obviously knowing what Soul did to Mother Anastasia, and then not being dead, is going to be a big deal. And then obviously Mother Coral, she has to be involved in this somehow. So we get a lot of these answers, but what we still need to know is where does the Sith Stranger, where does Chimere fit into all of this? Is Mother Coral pulling the strings? Is there another Sith Lord at play who's using them all as pawns? Let's find out. Let's see what happens in that final episode. And yeah, just again, a little bit more food for thought when you're thinking about this episode, or if you get a chance to rewatch it over the next few days before the season finale. There you go. All right, Bucketheads. This has been the Mandovision Podcast. Thanks for checking out our bonus episode. I am your host, Nargai Tom. Follow us on the socials. We're Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. And, of course, if you can and you're willing, sweet, sweet, sweet 5-star reviews. Thank you to everyone who downloads and streams and shares the show. And that goes for everyone on YouTube. My YouTube numbers are actually pretty impressive, considering we are not a video-based podcast at the moment. Maybe down the road, the numbers are persuasive to get involved and make you guys see my face, which is terrifying for me. But maybe one day. All right, Bucketheads, you know what? We'll be back next week. I don't think I'll have any more bonus episodes, but we'll just have to see what happens in the wacky world of Star Wars in the meantime. Otherwise, I'll catch up with you all next week for the season finale of Star Wars The Acolyte. Go out there, be great Star Wars fans, And remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.